So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and this one is also going to be on 0.97, and as I've said before, whenever I get something on 0.97 I do tend to push it to the front of the queue, because obviously it is sort of an advertisement, as it were, for the upcoming patch, which I think mechanically is looking very, very good indeed, so any chance I get to show it off I am most certainly going to take it. And interestingly enough, this one is one that I'm actually in, so how about that? I know that someone in the comments a couple of videos ago did ask, how about I be in some of my battles every now and then, which I do keep meaning to, and well, here you go. So today, myself and J Monster will be playing as the Dwarven Alliance of Erebor and Khad-dûm, and we shall be facing off against the forces of Isengard under the command of Engsfit and the Fallen Kingdom of Númenor under the command of Creed. So yeah, I mean, this is a new and updated map of the FORDS of ISEN, so, you know, or FORDS of ISEN. So this is a map which has been technically here ever since vanilla, although this is obviously a very different version of it. Previously it was very small, there was only one crossing, there was a small island in the middle, but it was pretty much a bog standard river crossing with the island in the middle, which honestly didn't help you too much if you were the one that was forced to charge, because obviously a river crossing battle is very much based around artillery and ranged units, and the melee units in the middle tend to just get slaughtered en masse. So here we have a much larger scale, so we obviously still have the river running through and we still have the large island in the middle, but everything has been made a little bit bigger in terms of scale. So there are several ways onto the central island. There are 3 ways on each side of the river, and obviously there's a lot more space in the middle as well, so potentially there's a lot more open space for more mobile units to use. And also infantry won't be quite so under the cosh as it was previously under sort of artillery and range fire. Artillery and range fire are still going to be the primary things which are going to be important in this sort of battle, because it is still technically a river crossing. There's just many river crossings rather than just the one. And also infantry is going to be a big part of this battle as well, because obviously there are quite a lot of terrain features, like these little encampments, these little hills, the sort of things which mean that infantry is going to be engaging in choke points quite a lot, and so that's going to be, you know, polearm is going to be important, that sort of thing. Infantry power is going to be important, which is a good thing for us because we are playing as the dwarves. So we'll start off with my army, and I'm playing as the dwarves of Erebor. Now, Erebor of the 2 dwarven factions are the ones which have slightly the weaker infantry, but they also do have a little bit more in terms of variety with regards to what they can bring in support of their infantry, and their infantry is still not bad by any means. I mean, it's not quite up to the standard of Khad-dûm, but it is still very, very strong, and the vast majority of they are still stronger than the vast majority of other factions when it comes to their infantry power. So I've got a couple of units here of Ironfoot Spears, which I put out on this flank, purely because the idea here was both myself and J Monster would be very aggressive with our Dwarven infantry. We're going to just charge right up the pipe here, and we're going to go right into the enemy infantry line and try and get into close quarters as quickly as possible with our infantry, because we knew that is exactly the sort of thing, that is exactly the sort of place where we want to be. So these Ironfoot Spears are out on the flank, because I also knew that I wasn't going to bring any of my war goats. While this is a sort of aspect of their army that Erebor certainly have over Khad-dûm in terms of the strengths of their faction as a whole. They have sort of cavalry that is pretty damn good. It's still not going to trade efficiently at all with wargs. Wargs, of course, have got that AP. They're very good against other mounted units, and so they're pretty much ideally suited for taking on the war goats. And obviously, if he brought the champions to the right hand as well, it would have been even worse. So I felt on this map that it was a good idea to just go very aggressive with the infantry and leave a couple of units in support in the back to just try and sort of zone out any cavalry that tries to come around my flanks. And that is what the Ironfoot Spears are here to do, because obviously Spears in 0.97 much stronger against cavalry, so they're going to be out on the flank. Out here at the front I do have 2 units of Ironfoot crossbows, one of which is already shooting, so this is probably the main area in which Erebor sort of define themselves against Khad-dûm. They have a very strong array of crossbows, and in this map in particular as well, if I can get them into a good position, they're obviously going to be very good in support. Isengard can respond in kind. The idea that I had was to put the Ironfoot crossbows up on this slightly raised terrain, which obviously does put them in the firing line, but it also allows them to fire on pretty much anything they choose to, within a certain range, of course. Then I have 2 units of Erebor Legionaries. Now the Erebor Legionaries, Isengard have got some pretty damn good infantry. The Uruk-hai infantry can honestly trade, you know, against regular Ironfoot warriors. It's probably going, neither one of those 2 units is going to come out of it looking particularly good. The Ironfoot warriors might slightly win it, but it's still not going to be too much of an effective trade for Erebor, and indeed Isengard may very well win it with their supporting tools. But Isengard don't really have an equivalent to the Erebor Legionaries in terms of quality. If Isengard want to take on this particular line infantry unit in a sustained melee fight, then they're going to have to use something like Uruk-hai Berserkers or even Nazkai. So it is certainly a bit of a power play to bring a unit like this on the front. I'm also going to be bringing some Ironfoot Pikes, of course. Ironfoot Pikes are very, very solid, and Isengard are always going to bring Uruk-hai Pikemen on a battlefield like this where there's the potential for choke points and more grindy fights, and so I need to respond to that with something. I couldn't just bring halberdiers, so a couple of units of these Ironfoot pikes are going to be in support of my front line of Erebor legionaries, and that should be a very solid front line indeed. Moving over to this flank, I do have, I believe, indeed, a couple of units of these Ironfoot warriors. So again, like I said, they are certainly not as strong as the Erebor legionaries, and there is the potential that Uruk-hai can actually fight them and sort of trade with them relatively efficiently. But obviously they are slightly cheaper than the Erebor legionaries. I couldn't afford to just bring 4 units of Erebor legionaries. It would have made my army terribly small. And the Ironfoot warriors are still going to be very good at hunting down lesser Isengard units, so Uruk-hai raiders, Snaga, that sort of thing. Just getting in and amongst it, the Ironfoot warriors, was my plan here. And J-Monster is also going to be right here, so if need be, we can support each other with some of our units. Obviously, teamwork can be a very important factor in battles like this. A couple of units of Axguard of Erebor, again, Isengard and Númenor both pack on the armour, so a sort of very strong unit of AP Axemen like this is certainly not going to go amiss. Obviously very, very strong. Again, the equivalent Khad-dûm units are probably slightly stronger than the Axguard of Erebor, but ultimately they will be more than enough to do the job here. I do have a couple of units of Ironfoot halberds as well. Again, if need be, I can leave them behind to sort of guard my backlines against cavalry, but I can also send them forward. The AP is still going to be very useful, of course, and as long as they don't get engaged one-to-one against pikes, they'll be able to deploy their phalanx very effectively. And then back here I do obviously have the mighty Blacklock engineers. Obviously they're going to be a beacon for any sort of ranged or cavalry pressure that I'm going to be receiving. But if I can get them into the right position, they're obviously going to tear holes through either the Isengard or the Númenor army potentially. So really it's a bit of a power play. It's certainly something that Khad-dûm also don't have access to. So it certainly makes a bit of sense to bring them to sort of diversify our army a little bit, even if we're going very infantry heavy. And then finally my general, who is going to be over here, is going to be in the Highborns of Erebor. The Highborns of Erebor in 0.97 are also now the strongest sword and board unit that Erebor have to offer, even stronger than the Dragon Slayers of Ered Mithrin, although I believe the Dragon Slayers are AP and the Highborns are not. The Highborns also, I believe, have the Encouragement aura, so they're going to keep my dwarves in the fight for longer. And Erebor's morale is also slightly lower than Khad-dûm's as well, so a little bit more of a quantity-focused army here from myself, I suppose, but obviously with the buffing, with all of the support units I've got in place, I should still be able to lay down a bit of a hurting on Isengard, provided all goes well. But obviously Isengard have got some good support tools, which we'll go on to in just a moment. Moving on to J-Monster's army of Khad-dûm. Obviously Khad-dûm, like I said, have got slightly the stronger infantry force. Alongside Númenor and Imladris, they probably throw their hat into the ring for being overall the strongest infantry faction in the game. So we have the warriors of Khad-dûm all along the front line with the armour upgrades as well. So obviously this is the equivalent really to my Ironfoot warriors, and he has also got the sentries of Khad-dûm. Over here he's got a lot of sentries of Khad-dûm actually. Now he doesn't have a halberdier unit, which is another thing which Erebor have, that Khad-dûm do not, but the sentries of Khad-dûm are a more affordable pike unit, and they will obviously, this is probably the most quantity focused front line from Khad-dûm you're going to see, but it is still very effective, and obviously this dwarven phalanx is going to be very difficult to break down, heavily armoured, long range on those pikes, very, very nice indeed. So I've got a couple of units here of the Orc Hunts of Khad-dûm. This is something which I as Erebor cannot field, a long range arch unit, good damage, again, maybe not the best in a skirmish fight, particularly against the more heavily armoured skirmishers from Númenor across the way, but they're still going to be able to put some pressure on sort of individual units, which is going to be quite important moving forwards. We also have the upgraded 4th Legion Shield Guard. Obviously they have, I believe they have the Spear Malice now against infantry and melee. I could be wrong about that, but I believe that has been changed to sort of make it so they're not just an all-purpose unit anymore. They were very much the Swiss Army knife of the game back in 0.96.1, but I believe that's not the case anymore. But they do have a heightened bonus against cavalry, as all spears have now, and they of course are in the back line as well. J-Monster has to be a little bit careful about enemy cavalry marauding around as well, because certainly as the two dwarven factions, we're going to be obviously a little bit caught short, particularly against Númenor. Númenor have got some very nice cavalry options that can be used more offensively other than the wargs of Isengard. So more 4th Legion over here. So, and he's also got the Legion Bodyguard over here, which is going to be his general. It too has the Encouragement aura, so he's going to be keeping his dwarves in the fight for longer, which could very well be very important against the strong front line of Númenor. Back over here, however, you can see that he is going to be sending over some forces to help me. And this is, again, teamwork is going to be very important in this sort of game, and so moving over here to try and crush one of the armies with a little bit more pressure while his phalanx just sort of holds Númenor for a long period of time was the play here, and we felt as though Isengard was slightly the softer target when you compare the two in terms of their infantry prowess. So he's going to be sending over a single unit of upgraded warriors of Khad-dûm. He has the Mithril Guard, which obviously again AP, very, very deadly still, and then 2 units of Hammers of Gundabad, which the Hammers of Gundabad, when you compare them to the 2nd Legion, they do actually offer a little bit more in terms of their defense. They actually have sort of thicker armor, better melee defense as well. Sin is playing Rocket League. But they also have, which is probably the most important feature in my opinion of the Hammers of Gundabad, they are locked morale. So outside of sort of army losses kicking in when you've already well and truly lost the fight, they will not rout, which is a pretty important distinction, especially when you're going to be sending them into a real meat grinder. Isengard have got a lot of tools that can break units very quickly, like crossbows, the ballista, the trolls, the wargs. Hammers of Gundabad will not break in the face of that. So, like J Monster said after this battle was concluded, he does like the Hammers of Gundabad for that reason. I actually wasn't aware that they were locked morale before this battle started. I thought that had changed, but I was wrong. So that is really the distinction between themselves and the Second Legion. A lot of people tend to bring the Second Legion because they're a little bit stronger on the offense in terms of pure damage, but the Hammers definitely have their place. So next we'll move on to Númenor, the forces of Creed over here. Númenor, of course, proving themselves to be very, very strong in 0.97 thus far. So we have the Romena marksmen here on the front line, which obviously don't let the looks fool you. They are certainly not on the same level as the Arthedain marksmen. They are far, far better in terms of both their damage, their melee prowess as well. So in terms of a skirmish fight here, they should be fine against the Orcans of Khad-dûm. They do need to be careful, however, because there are fewer of them, and if Khad-dûm, like the plan is, to come barreling down upon the Númenor front line, this sort of onion effect that he's got going on with the archers at the front, then the javelins, then he's got the sort of the axe throwers and the pikes. Creed is going to need to make sure that he keeps all of this organised formation sort of moving around appropriately, otherwise individual units could get caught out by the Khad-dûm infantry push. He's got the Romena Marines back here, which are going to be absolutely vital for taking on Khad-dûm, because Númenor, much like in Ladris, they have very, very high quality across their army, but they rely on that a lot, to the extent they don't actually have a lot of AP tools. The Romena Marines are probably the primary one that you would think of, because they obviously are javelins. They don't have a huge amount of ammunition, but the javelins that they do throw are very, very deadly. So the initial damage they do to the Khad-dûm front line could be very, very key. And also back here we have, of course, the pike line, which, interestingly enough, Númenor can afford a bit of a pike advantage here. J-Monster has not brought the First Legion, so that means the upgraded Romena Sentinels and the Naaru Sentinels here in the middle are going to be more than enough to ensure that the Phalanx battle is won by Númenor over here, especially when they're backed up by the Seafarers. They too have javelins, although I believe they count as axe throwers, which means they're not actually AP, so they're not going to be that deadly against the Dwarves of Khad-dûm. Having said that, that will still be enough to do a decent amount of damage, particularly if they can get around to the sides and start throwing them into the sides of that formation. And then back here, of course, the Alcarondas Legion, which, again, they're going to be able to defeat Warriors of Khad-dûm, upgraded Warriors of Khad-dûm, even they are a very, very potent line infantry unit, as we've seen before. Very much like, well, they are basically the Castamir's Legion from Umbar. Very, very good, very, very solid unit. And then back across the river over here, which, using the terrain to their advantage, I like it. We have the Temple Guard, and we can't just charge across the deeper sections of the river, which means they're going to be sort of free to shoot J-Monster as he approaches, and obviously they're AP missiles, so they can definitely pick and choose their targets. They have these sort of upgraded unit models, well, the changed unit models. This isn't an armour upgrade for the Temple Guard, this is just their new Númenorian unit model. And then over here he does have some cavalry as well, I believe. So he has some Númenorian lancers, which is good to see. Obviously, cavalry and mobility and that sort of thing is going to be something which you can definitely bring to bear against the dwarves. And I believe he also has another unit of cavalry over here, which is going to be the Eldalonde Nobles, which of course are, technically speaking, a melee bodyguard cavalry unit, but there was always the possibility that Khad-dûm could bring a few units of mercs, and obviously if my war goats were on the field as well, this would be a very efficient unit. As it is, though, they're just going to be used as sort of makeshift shock cavalry. Then moving on to the final army in this sort of extended look at the 0.97 rosters, we have Engsvitz playing as Isengard. Isengard by no means are a poor infantry faction, but they are certainly the ugly duckling in company like this. I mean, Khad-dûm and Númenor in particular have got a lot of quality. Erebor is not far behind them in terms of that either. Isengard have got a very balanced approach for the Orcs. They've definitely got some strong units, but they're definitely going to be relying on more supporting factors in order to beat myself and Erebor and also any Khad-dûm units that come across. Certainly not the sort of unit that's going to be doing that are going to be the Dunlending Clansmen. Now, the Dunlending Clansmen do have a slightly better anti-cavalry bonus, being Dunlanders, and they're already spears, so that can make them potent in the right situation. But not in this one. Not against Dwarven infantry. They're going to get slaughtered en masse. They are literally here to die for the cause. Back here we also have some Uruk-hai archers, which again, Uruk-hai archers are a questionable pick, purely because dwarves, of course, are arguably the best factions at sort of absorbing ranged firepower. There are a few human factions which can do that very well also. And again, the armour and shields, it's going to be very difficult for a basic unit of archers like this to get too much in the way of kills done. However, if they do retreat back across the river, over time and unopposed, they could rack up a decent amount of damage on my army, depending on how things go. More Dunlending clansmen, definitely an onion effect here. Isengard going for the layers, which, considering all of his ranged units, is not necessarily the worst thing to do. But he is going to have to hope that his layers do hold for long enough for his ranged units to actually do some damage. He's got some Uruk-hai archers back here again, a second unit. Of course, he has the Uruk-hai pikemen, very much a given on this match. It's very rare that you'll see Isengard not bring any pikes at all. Even when they go for a rush, I feel as though the pikes being the final wave to just sort of shore things up is always a fairly solid thing to do. But, you know, they can be fairly expensive, but if you bring them en masse. But here, obviously, in a sort of a narrower engagement potentially, as we sort of fight back towards this river, could be very, very handy indeed. Of course, the crossbows as well. Going to be going toe-to-toe with my Ironfoot crossbows. Obviously that AP is going to be very useful. He also has some Snaga skirmishers hidden around here, which obviously those javelins are going to be very useful. Isengard is not light on AP by any means. He also has the Isengard ballista, which this could be make or break for Isengard. It's fairly expensive, but it is also, in my opinion, the best piece of siege equipment in the game currently. If they sort of get it into the right position and start shooting right along my ranks, it could be devastation for me. And then it doesn't matter how good my infantry is, I will just be outnumbered by all of the Uruk-hai. So we'll see how that goes. We've got more pikes back here. We also have some AP. I was a little bit surprised not to see more AP in this army, actually. We do have the Half-Orc Baneguard, which are reasonably solid shock troops as well, but we don't see any Uruk-hai Reavers, we don't see any Dunlending Wild Berserkers, which obviously that's more and more AP that can be brought. We do, however, have some more crossbows in a similar position to the Temple Guard there, so getting ready to sort of shoot across the river with the water as a barrier. Here we have the Trolls of the White Hand, which I'm glad I get to show these guys, because the Trolls of the White Hand, obviously, their model in 0.96 is not terribly inspiring, but this one is much, much better. So obviously these have been given the Crimson Bahelite treatment, similar sort of models now to the Cave Trolls, Cave Troll Drummers, the Olag-hai, that sort of thing. They look much more menacing now, and the Trolls of the White Hand are definitely still one of the strongest trolls in the game, and they could certainly be something which gives my army some pause, as could the Champions of the White Hand if they cycle around the back and sort of, because again, I'm not defending this section of the map at all. They could very easily get in behind me. The question is whether they can get behind my spears then, sort of get at my squishier targets. But the Champions of the White Hand, obviously, very, very powerful indeed. Uruk-hai Berserkers, again, multiple HP, AP, pretty ideal for taking on the Dwarves, to be honest. They are pretty expensive, but even so, very, very good. And then the final unit we can talk about before we get into the fight proper, just a unit of standard War Riders, which are already ready to sort of start cycling around and start hitting our armies in the back. However, without further ado, having had a look at the extended compositions, let us begin. So, naturally, this is going to be a very aggressive push by myself and Jaemon, so we're going to really try and leverage the infantry quality that both Erebor and Khad-dûm have, particularly against Isengard. And fortunately for us, Engsfitz has played into our hands perhaps a little bit by going, you can see there that I wasn't able to get my crossbows off fire at will, so they do waste a volley into the Dunlending clansmen. But 2 units of Uruk-hai archers, 2 units of Dunlending clansmen. This is exactly the sort of units which, as Erebor, I want to see as I come barreling towards his lines, the Erebor legionaries with their shields leading the way, and then following them in, the pikes out of phalanx for the time being, but I will of course switch them back into their phalanx formation when we get into melee. And we will also start to see the appearance of some Snaga up here. So again, this is a little interesting area, because obviously you can't advance right through the stakes. So the Snaga are over here as Erebor start to charge forward, but I think actually already it's going to be time for a bit of slow motion, because a lot happens in this battle despite only being 13k frames. Everything happens very quickly, obviously, as it often does when one team decides to be aggressive en masse. So you can see here the Isengard Snaga starting to throw their javelins into the side of the infantry. Relatively inaccurate, but it's still AP damage, which is obviously exactly the sort of thing that Isengard are going to want to see. So you can see here that both my units of Erebor legionaries are just going to collapse on this unit of Dunlending clansmen. And this is going to go very poorly for the Dunlending clansmen. They will not last very long at all. And you can see here that already the Half-Orc Baneguard are going to have to come forward to try and stop this. The Isengard Onion is already under some serious threat. You can see, however, also that the Champions of the White Hand and the Warg Riders are starting to cycle around to the backfield. My pikes are also getting involved. However, while all of these units just work on battering down the front line through sheer aggression, I'm also going to be siphoning off one of my units of Ironfoot Spears, because I did notice there was a huge gap in the formation over here. There are Baneguard arriving now, however, sort of trying to poke holes and gaps in this sort of layered defence that Isengard have set out is going to be important. Sort of getting in and amongst their squishier ranks, even with a unit of Iron Foot Spears, is going to be very, very useful. And following them in, I will also have a unit of Axguard of Erebor. I'm also using the raised terrain. I'm going to be getting my crossbows up onto this position over here so I can start shooting down into these squishier targets. In particular, I wanted to go after stuff like the pikes, so I would have a definitive infantry advantage. Iron Foot pikes over here. We can see the Iron Foot warriors getting up here, getting into the Snaga. They were not able to retreat in time. The Snaga are going to have to get out of there because obviously Iron Foot warriors are going to easily defeat them in melee. Khad-dûm are shifting forward slower than I am, mainly because if they do charge into Númenor unthinkingly, those javelins will take them out. However, you can also see that Khad-dûm over here are committing forward some infantry units over here. So Númenor is also sending over the Seafarers up in Damos to try and help shore up the defensive line, because so far so good for the Dwarven advance. We've definitely got in and amongst it, you know, and Engsvitz is scrambling to try and sort of cover the holes which have already appeared. You can see here that the Erebor legionaries just massacring the Dunlending clansmen. You couldn't really ask for a better target for them. The Dunlending clansmen are going to do next to no damage to this unit of very strong Dwarven infantry. You can see back here the Iron Foot Spears pushed very far, actually. They got quite a long way into this formation. They're going to get sort of surrounded by half-orc Vanguard, but the reinforcements are now on the way. The Axguard of Erebor are on the way forward, and they're going to be able to sort of collapse it on the Vanguard themselves. And the Vanguard, they may be good, but they're no match as Axemen for the Axguard of Erebor. You can see the crossbows are still going about their grisly work. We have been seeing the Isengard Ballista fire, but I don't really think it has the best angle. And also, really all it did was sort of harden my resolve, as it was, to sort of get into melee as quickly as possible, so that the vast bulk of my infantry could not be targeted by the Isengard Ballista. Because obviously, if I left a bunch of units back here, the Isengard Ballista would have focused them down, and that would have been the end of them. But getting all of my infantry into sort of close proximity now is exactly what the Doctor ordered, so really the presence of the Isengard Ballista didn't really change my tactics at all, really. You can see over here I've got some halberds on the hill. These Iron Foot Spears. The wargs are still a concern for me again. Mobility is certainly not the dwarf's strong suit, so I'm still just... I need to guard my crossbows, because the crossbows are really what's giving me the impunity and the impetus to just keep charging forwards, because Isengard are always going to be reliant on their support units in a fight like this, and as the battle has gone so far, my support units have probably been slightly more effective. You can see over here, however, the Black Blocks are being focused down by the Isengard Ballista. Unfortunate for me, they are very expensive, but they're also spread out and they're not really getting too many kills. The Isengard Ballista is killing off individual unit models, but it's not as if he's collapsing in on my entire formation. Meanwhile, you can see over here that Númenor is having to send across more and more sort of reinforcements to stop this mass push that both myself and J-Monster have going on in the middle here. Combination of Ironfoot warriors, warriors of Khad-dûm. We also have some Axguard and Highborns of Erebor, in addition to Hammers of Gundabad. This is a lot of quality infantry over here in the middle of these two armies, and we're almost splitting the two opposing armies in half here with this infantry push. There's more Hammers of Gundabad on the way, and as if to sort of make sure that Númenor can't just send over all of their infantry over to this section of the battlefield, J-Monster is now committing his main army forwards, and he's going to engage Númenor from the front. Meanwhile, you can see over here the Alcarondas Legion is still moving over because Isengard's front line is in trouble. He went for a lot of sort of lower tier infantry and skirmishers, which is not necessarily the wrong thing to do. A lot of supporting units for Isengard can tip the balance, but I feel as though how quick we were able to move forward definitely caught them off guard, and the formation is already looking pretty dicey. You can see J-Monster has also got his Meteor Guard over here, where I've been able to sort of push Isengard back quite a long way with the Ironfoot Spears and the Axguard of Erebor. As soon as a gap appears, the Meteor Guard will jump right on it, and they'll be right in and amongst all of the juicy targets back here, including the Uruk-hai crossbows, the Isengard Ballista. There are trolls back there, but Meteor Guard with their AP are going to be able to do a decent amount of damage to trolls. You can see over here that the Warg Riders are now being activated, so they need to do something with their cavalry here, but I've actually turned all of my crossbows onto these Wargs, because at this point I feel as though my crossbows have actually done enough damage on the front line to sort of justify their existence. The Wargs are coming forward, and sort of as I was sort of moving around some units on the front line here, they take their opportunity to charge into the Black Blocks once again. So the Black Blocks are definitely acting here as a beacon for all of Engsvitz's frustrations, because he's done some good damage to them, and I haven't really been able to get them into a good position to start shooting. If I did, then Isengard would be in real trouble. But as it is, things have gone relatively poorly for my Black Blocks here. You can see here that the Warg Riders do charge into the Ironfoot Halberds as well, so they probably will take a little bit of damage, but they do actually take a lot of those Halberds with them. The charge off a unit of Wargs is certainly no joke, And they do manage to kill off more of my black blocks as well. So at this point, for all the progress that myself and J-Monster have managed to achieve, oh dear, oh dear. Look at that, the Ballista also scything right through these formations over here. That's a lot of dead Ironfoot warriors and warriors of Khad-dûm, which is exactly what Isengard need, because now, for all of the infantry progress that myself and J-Monster have made, now Isengard's sort of more invested units are starting to come forward and sort of be counted. We've got the Wargs and we've got the Ballista now doing damage, so all is not lost for Isengard yet. You can see here that Khad-dûm are starting to move forward as well, putting more pressure on the Númenor line. Númenor is having to send over more and more resources to stop this Khad-dûm advance, however. The Hammers of Gundabad are right in and amongst it up against these Romena Marines and the Seafarers of Niendamos. They're pretty deep in there though. It could be pretty hairy for them if that continues. You can see over here the Uruk-hai pikemen fighting alongside the Alcarondas Legion, but even with Uruk-hai pikes and Alcarondas Legion, this is where a lot of my quality in particular is centred, because I've got my Highborns of Erebor in here, I've got my Axe Guard, J-Monster has also got his own infantry units in here as well, so there's a huge amount of Dwarven quality over here. So even the likes of the Alcarondas Legion is not going to be able to slow this down, and the Highborns with their morale buff is going to make sure that the Dwarves aren't going to think about routing anytime soon, even with the Isengard Ballista piling on that pressure. The Wargs here are in the backfield. I'm having to keep back halberds and Ironfoot spears to sort of cover my crossbows, because I do need my backlines to be somewhat defended. And now, we can see the Trolls of the White Hand are on the way forward. The Mithril Guard have decided to join in the assault alongside the Axe Guard of Erebor and the Ironfoot Pikes. We can see here that the front line, for me, is still going very, very well. Isengard don't have too much left on the front line, so you can see here that where the line is starting to break apart, I'm starting to push Erebor Legionaries in, trying to shut down those crossbows, because as soon as the crossbows have a clear shot, they're definitely going to be taking it, so need to get those Erebor Legionaries in to start shutting down those armor-piercing missiles. You can see over here, however, the Númenorian Lancers and the Elder Londe Nobles are coming over to assist the Isengard Wargs, so now all of a sudden I've got 4 units of cavalry in my backlines, and that's something I'm going to struggle to shut down. The crossbows are going to be able to do damage to them the longer they hang around, but I'm not going to be able to sort of cover every angle, so I'm going to have to just accept the fact that I'm going to take losses here. All I need to do, however, is to make sure that this is not cost effective for them. You can see the Champions of the White Hand also over here. Crossbows are going to be sort of making themselves pay. Here come the Trolls of the White Hand, however. Real juggernauts in melee, as we've said before. Defeat seems certain for the Uruk-hai front line. Now, however, you can see the Warriors of Khad-dûm starting to charge in here. And actually it's only pikemen that are on the front line at this point, because most of the other resources have been siphoned off to try and stop this advance in the centre. There goes another ballista shot. So the Dwarves, what they might try and do here is just try and push and break the pike formation. Now there are some Temple Executioners here which I actually missed in the army compositions, and they may very well be the strongest unit of infantry on the field today. I'm not quite sure. I mean, the Mithril Guard and the Highborns of Erebor are very, very good, but they're all different kinds of units, I suppose. See here, some 4th Legion Shield Guards still covering the backlines, making life very difficult for Creed to get his Elder Londe Nobles into the back of J-Monster, and that is where J-Monster has done slightly better than me. He's got more 4th Legion, so he's more able to sort of guard his backlines. Most of his infantry force is made up of pikes as well, so definitely not a sort of glowing target for the enemy cavalry to go after. But this Númenor pipeline is going to hold. I mean, he's got his Legion Bodyguard in here. But really, J-Monster is just engaging these pikes. We're winning the battle elsewhere, which is the main thing. Meanwhile, these Hammers of Gundabad still just fighting hard. They're now receiving some support from the sentries of Khad-dûm, which is excellent news for us. Here in the middle, we're still just sort of slowly but surely crushing our way through this force. The Trolls of the White Hand have been committed here, but this is honestly one of the best places we could hope to see the Trolls of the White Hand, where so many of our infantry units are. You know, basic infantry is still going to drop like flies, to be honest, against the Trolls of the White Hand, but Highborns of Erebor, and also I've still got my Axe Guard of Erebor over here. They are going to be able to do decent damage to these Trolls. However, Engsvit's changing tactic here. He's now going to get his Trolls into my back line as well. You can see over here that there were a few more cavalry losses, more Dwarven losses as well, but now I've got Trolls in the back line as well, so really it's just a case of me playing whack-a-mole back here, trying to make it so that it's not as juicy a target as it could be. The Champions of the White Hand obviously charging in here, getting a lot of kills. They're very, very durable, so even though spears are now stronger against cavalry, it's still going to take a little bit of time before the Ironfoot spears are able to burn through the multiple HP that the Champions of the White Hand offer. With the support of the crossbows, I should be able to do it, but the problem is I'm having to sort of deal with so many of these. But here we have some Ironfoot halberds, which the phalanx is down, and this I think is a bit of a misplay from Creed. I don't know if he knew what these were. but he charges headlong into a phalanx, a braced phalanx of Ironfoot halberdiers, and this is going to go pretty badly for the Númenorian Lance. I mean, they do manage to get some kills off the charge, as you will from the charge bonus, but things are going to turn around relatively quickly for the Númenorian Lances. They need to cycle out of here quickly, because you can see immediately they're starting to take some pretty serious casualties the longer they stay in melee. Huge losses there. The Blacklock Engineers are also going to be shooting into their backs as they leave.
They have lost half their men.
Ironfoot halberds also moving over here, so far so good actually. Considering all of the backline pressure I've had to put up with, my dwarves have held up relatively strongly. I'm still in trouble back here, mind you. The trolls are now in and amongst things. They're shutting down my crossbows, and we still have the danger of the cavalry, which obviously halberdiers and spears. I'm trying to sort of waddle after these cavalry units, try and sort of catch up to them if I can, but it's not going terribly well for either one of us, I suppose, so far. I mean, again, you can see now the champions of the White Hand changing tactic. I think they realise that the longer they spend back here, the more haggard their infantry line becomes. And you can see over here, Isengard is really starting to struggle. The addition of those Mithril Guard on the front line, with all of my pikes and axe guard, as well as these Ironfoot spears, which are still holding firm against these AP troops. It really is just a matter of time, if anything. We're now really into the cookie jar, really. You can see the Uruk-hai archers are exposed. The Mithril Guard are going to be running back here. The Isengard ballista, even, which is trying to get into a better position to shoot, is also slightly exposed. One of the trolls is here. This is a charge which honestly needed to happen a bit sooner, I think, because here in the middle we've been slowly grinding away at so much of the enemy resources. But now the Númenorian Lancers do charge into the back of this central position. This is where my general is, interestingly enough. So Númenorian Lancers and Champions of the White Hand stepping on each other's toes a little bit there, actually. But the Axe Guard of Erebor are here, and the longer they stay in melee with all this Dwarven infantry, that AP, obviously you can see that did make a big dent, however, the Númenorian Lancers, doing a lot of damage there. Ironfoot Spears, at this point I'm going to be starting to move them forward, because I feel as though that they're sort of migrating away from pressuring my back line, and they're instead going to try and sort of hammer and anvil the front lines. So I'm going to be moving my Ironfoot Spears in, and once again you can see the Númenorian Lancers charging headlong into the spears. My spears were not braced this time around, but I'm more than willing to lose a few spearmen if it means breaking off this unit of Númenorian Lancers, because they're not looking good in terms of the manpower they've got available to them at this point. Meanwhile, this unit of trolls has absolutely butchered this unit of crossbows, but now that my halberds are free to engage and they're not just here to sort of stop the charges of cavalry, I'm going to be able to get my halberdiers into the fight against these trolls. And phalanx units are not the best used against trolls, but the AP should be enough to finish off the trolls. The White Hand, they've been in melee for quite a long time against various units, so I'm feeling fairly confident in that. Over here, meanwhile, J-Monster has managed to fight his way to his own units once again with his hammers of good and bad, so now the fight is very much on. The Temple Executioners, however, carving a hole right through the middle of this Dwarven position. However, they've carved a hole right into the Legion Bodyguard, so this is very much a battle of the Titans over here. The Legion Bodyguard from Khad-dûm against the Temple Executioners of Númenor. I'd certainly give that fight to the Temple Executioners, I think. But considering the position of the Temple Executioners, getting a bit surrounded here could be a little bit dodgy. I mean, the Temple Guard are firing away with their AP missiles. Still some 4th Legion over there. Elder Nobles are now in the backfield over there. J-Monster still zoning them out with the 4th Legion. Much like me, with my spears and halberds, J-Monster has had to keep these spearmen back, otherwise we would have just been free to be hammer and anvil, which is now happening. You know, these champions of the White Hand are proving to be a bit of a menace. You can see now that, you know, based on the announcer's announcements, we are starting to lose more men. Now that the cavalry is becoming a little bit more prevalent. Here we can see the Axe Guard of Erebor charging into the Uruk-hai Berserkers, which have waited quite a long time to be committed, which is surprising, because they are one of the units which can certainly do a lot of damage to the dwarves. The Axe Guard of Erebor, not exactly the ideal unit for taking them on, but I need to sort of occupy them with something. I can't allow them to just run free. And elsewhere you can see over here that this unit of pikemen over here is surrounded by Erebor legionaries and my own pikes, so we are still doing well over here. J-Monster has also pushed into the backfield over here. The Mithril Guard is absolutely butchering the Isengard ballista. And from there, we can see that my Ironfoot Spears are also going to try and shut down these crossbowmen. So the Mithril Guard and the Ironfoot Spears, the idea then is to just sort of scour this side of the bank to make sure the Temple Guard and the crossbows are not as free to fire as they would like. There we can see the Trolls of the White Hand trying to escape my halberdiers. The halberdiers waddling after them, of course. The crossbows still up on that raised ground, trying to shoot at what they can. There are the Champions of the White Hand getting another decent charge in. That's my general as well there, you can see. So he needs to be careful. I mean, if he dies, it's not great for me. The dwarves don't have quite the same level of morale as the elves, after all. Here are some 4th Legion Shield Guard, however. The Champions of the White Hand find themselves in a bit of bother at this point. There's so many spears that have been freed up by the cavalry being over here that suddenly all of the spears are starting to migrate to the middle here. Orcans of Khad-dûm still firing in, still getting some nice kills on these Númenorian pikemen. Snaga skirmishers trying to get into a position where they can fire as well. Moving back up the line. Uruk-hai crossbows. I did engage this unit of Erebor legionaries with them quite a long time ago. Not really because I thought the Erebor legionaries would win, because they were very, very depleted, but just because I want to shut down the Isengard crossbows. If we can do that in terms of the infantry quality, we're going to win.
If we continue like this, we will smash the enemy.
Here we can see the trolls of the White Hand up on the hills trying to kill off my crossbows, but I mean, at some point they're just going to have to accept the fact that they're going to have to fight these halberds in melee as well, which the AP is certainly not something they're going to enjoy. 2 units of fairly healthy halberds as well. I mean, they have seen combat, they've seen cavalry charges. I still have my Blacklock engineers alive, amusingly enough, so I'm going to try and get them into a position where I can really start firing, really start putting the hurt on Isengard, really turn that screw. Here you can see the Highborns of Erebor still very much alive, still 48 of them alive, so very few of them have actually died. So the cavalry charges didn't really hit the Highborns, otherwise more of them would have died. But as it is, they've done very well. And obviously the Highborns, you do pay a lot for them. I believe they're 1400 florins, so they are one of the most expensive infantry units in the game now. So you would certainly expect them to sit quite comfortably in a grindy fight like that and stay alive. Here are the Mithril Guard. You can see actually over here, I did manage to get my Ironfoot spears in, but they are horribly outnumbered. All I was trying to do was stop the crossbows from firing for long enough for these Mithril Guard to get in here, and obviously the Mithril Guard will have absolutely no issues whatsoever chewing through Uruk-hai crossbowman. You can see over here as well, just in the backfield, we're just seeing sort of the dying embers of this unit of trolls. They're surrounded on all sides by crossbows pulling out their hand axes, and the halberdiers as well, so the AP is certainly coming good there. Trolls to the White Hand, finally the menace in the backfield has been dealt with. The Elder Londe nobles are coming back now, so it seems that I really can't catch a break when it comes to sort of having this cavalry buzzing around my infantry line. Again, that's more of a symptom of me not having quite the same tools as, well, not having quite the same good sense of positioning as J-Monster, I suppose, with his 4th Legion, making it much harder for Númenor and Isengard to get some good charges off, whereas with me there have been more gaps. And the Blacklock Engineers getting another charge here, really acting as a beacon once again. You can't let the Blacklock Engineers get into position now anyway, it would be curtains for them if they did. So the Champions of the White Hand definitely doing the right thing by charging into them. I still have my halberds in the backfield though. After defusing those trolls, they're now free to come back. My Ironfoot spears are also back here, sort of still just charging after the Champions of the White Hand. I'm very eager to get rid of this cavalry, because as soon as we do, the battle is pretty much won for us. Having a look at what's happening over here between Khad-dûm and Númenor. It says defeat seems certain for Númenor, and I think that's mainly because of how deep the Dwarven line still is. Númenor had to send across a lot of their supporting units to try and help Isengard as they started to buckle, and at this point they don't have much left for themselves, unfortunately, and Khad-dûm are coming down on them like a ton of bricks. The Temple Executioners overwhelmed really in melee. The Legion Bodyguard and the Warriors of Khad-dûm fighting as one. You can see the pikes now getting in here. They're actually charging. Not often you see pikemen charge like that, sort of almost bayonet charging, and I would imagine they'll get into phalanx now, however. The Númenor line is still holding, however, but the problem they will have, of course, is this would be fine if they were winning on the other flank, which they're not, so it's not looking so good for them at this point. Sentries of Khad-dûm, there's still Dwarven missile pressure, and there's still those units of 4th Legion in the backfield as well. This is not so good for the Hammers of Gundabad, however. They're going to get a rear charge from the Champions of the White Hand. That's going to be most of their unit gone, to be fair. The Snaga are doing their best to sort of lay down some AP damage on the big Dwarven blob. But now you can see here in the middle, finally we're victorious. They did make us pay for that more than it looked like they were initially going to. The only really healthy unit I have left are my Highborns. Some warrior, well, that's J-Monster's Warriors of Khad-dûm there. But now, the units I had over here that were victorious, and I'm also pushing across some Ironfoot spears and halberds as well. I'm just going to move across and we're going to try and finish off Númenor as quickly as possible. Over here, meanwhile, the Uruk-hai Berserkers still holding firm, doing well. Defeat seems certain at this point, although I believe... Well, I don't know. I mean, they're doing very well against the Axe Guard of Erebor. The Erebor Legionaries obviously still doing their thing. I'm amazed these Uruk-hai pikemen actually are still here. I mean, they are fighting to the death, but they were in a very disadvantageous position for a long time, and they managed to hold their ground and keep fighting. Ironfoot crossbows moving into place. We still have some Isengard units in the backfield. We have some Uruk-hai archers trying to do some damage, but like I said before, relatively inaccurate fire, but also the fact that the dwarves are better at dealing with sort of lower tier archer fire than most. The Mithril Guard are over here, but defeat seems certain for them, and that is because the Temple Guard, who are now presumably out of ammunition, I've come over here to help the the Uruk-hai crossbows in melee. And this is a fight too much even for the Mithril Guard. They've been in melee for a little bit after all. A little bit battle weary perhaps. The Uruk-hai Berserkers still doing some damage. Here come the champions of the White Hand as well. There's still these Elder Londe nobles to concern ourselves with as well. And they're still actually pretty healthy. They're charging in, but again, this is a relatively foolhardy charge as well, I think, because there's Ironfoot spears here. You're not really going to be able to kill off Highborns of Erebor too quickly. I mean, to be fair, more losses have been incurred here. I would assume that's down to the combination of the Cav charges and the Snaga throwing their javelins in here. Low quality they may be. Here come the Narun Aru Sentinels still trying to hold down the front line. The Snaga trying to be in support here, as both myself and J-Monster send one in the middle, as well as a few more units of 4th Legion to finally lock down Númenor's infantry for good. There's a few Highborns of Erebor over here just out in the middle of nowhere. Not sure what they're doing. Meanwhile, the Erebor Legionaries, which were victorious against the crossbows, now just going to come in here to try and deal with the Uruk-hai Berserkers, who now victory seems certain for them. They've definitely fought very hard. There goes the Isengard General, and I'm sure you can see in the backfield there that was a result of them straying too close to the crossbows for too long. I mean, the crossbows have definitely been loosing most of their bolts into the enemy cavalry this time, just to try and zone them out and do some damage. And it's finally found its mark onto the Isengard General. So unfortunate for Engsvitz there. Here are the Ironfoot Pikes. You can see that, actually, may as well go up to 1 speed now. You can see that the Elder Londe Nobles still charging around. You can also see that the Blacklock Engineers have continued to just be charged into oblivion. Only 7 of them alive. So while the Blacklocks have not really done what I wanted them to, the rest of my army most certainly has.
Winning the battle. If we continue like this, we will smash the enemy.
The dwarves now pushing in, obviously both myself and J-Monster with a combination of our spears, and then I've obviously got my Highborns in there as well. We're going to start to munch up the line here. J-Monster's also doing that on the other side actually, so it's going to be a full surround on what remains of the Númenorian infantry. And at this point things are looking very grim for the forces of evil. Well, Númenor are both evil and good, but certainly it's looking good for the dwarves here, the Ironfoot Pikes here. Still, this cavalry proving to be more of a pain than I'd like it to be. The Mithril Guard actually still fighting hard over there. Here come the Elder Londe Nobles getting another nice charge into that very beleaguered unit of Erebor Legionaries. They've served me well, but it looks as though at this point the cavalrymen from Númenor are going to be enough to kill them off. Even though the Pikes are trying to catch up to them, but again the Dwarven waddle to sort of try and desperately catch up with cavalry is limited in the amount of success you can have with that. Meanwhile, the Ironfoot crossbows are here, and they're going to be able to last samurai the Elder Londe Nobles, or at least they would be if they reloaded more quickly. Unfortunately for me, however, they do manage to get a frontal charge in there. But at this point, it's really only the Uruk-hai Berserkers that are left alive. And I don't really need to concern myself with them because they're being overwhelmed by Erebor Legionaries, sending across more Halberds as well. Over here, meanwhile, Highborns of Erebor and the Legion Bodyguard are in here. The 2 most powerful individual units of Dwarven infantry that are on the field. Well, actually no, the Mithril Guard are there as well, aren't they? But here we can see the final vestiges of Númenor, so at this point it's quite clear that the dwarves are going to have victory this day. Oh, excuse me. The last dregs of my cold still here. So that's going to be the end of that, and then obviously then this Dwarven infantry blob is just going to move as one. And, you know, the red team could very much get some more kills on us over here. You can see here the Ironfoot crossbows. At this point I don't actually have any other target to go after other than the Uruk-hai archers, so I figured, why not? May as well shoot at them. If the Elder Londe Nobles won't come back, then I'll just shoot at whatever's closest, because eventually that Númenorian cavalry is going to have to try and charge into stuff like Dwarven spears, pikes and halberds, and needless to say that's not going to go too well for them. Getting in there. Again, just Temple Guard and Elder Londe Nobles left at this point. Those Uruk-hai archers trying to get what kills they can on the 4th Legion. Shooting into the backs will take away the shield bonus, but very thick armour on the 4th Legion still. Ironfoot Pike's going to come over. Just going to make it a little bit more difficult for the Elder Londe Nobles to get into a good position. There's still actually some Uruk-hai Berserkers over here, but they are not long for this world. Very much caught. The Erebor Legionaries a bridge too far. The Uruk-hai Berserkers did do a fair amount of damage to me, actually, to be fair. If they had been committed sooner, when their line really needed them, maybe it could have been different. Here we can see the Ironfoot Pikes. just trying to make it as difficult as possible, trying to make the Elder Londe nobles, because I know in all likelihood I'm not going to be able to catch the Elder Londe nobles, but trying to make them go around the houses means that this time the last samurai effect is going to take place, and a few more of those cavalrymen are going to fall. And at this point, with only 6 Elder Londe nobles, the Ironfoot crossbows could probably take them in melee, to be fair. The hit points are most certainly gone at this point. Some Ironfoot crossbows are here. The Orc Hunters of Khad-dûm also firing in. It's really just clean up duty at this point. The Erebor legionaries, there go the Uruk-hai archers, routing in the face of the advancing Ironfoot pikemen.
If we remain true and steadfast, victory will be ours.
And the only question now is how long the Temple Guard and the Elder Londe nobles deign to stay on the battlefield. I would imagine that's not going to be terribly long. The Elder Londe nobles are making their backs point toward the Ironfoot crossbows. You can actually see as well that there is still my black locks. That was the missiles that they have, but obviously they've very much been the sacrificial lamb in this battle for me, which is not usually the role that the Blacklock engineers play, but it worked at the very least. The standard Ironfoot crossbows definitely pulled their weight in terms of kills, and here go the Elder Londe nobles finally rousing off. See now the dwarves just sort of charging forward en masse. The final 1,000 frames. Just having a look at the percentage of kills, we won fairly convincingly in the end. And I feel as though the precedent was set for that early on. You know, the very aggressive nature. I feel as though Isengard in particular was not ready for... Even if it had just been my units over there, I feel as though the gaps would have been very exploitable. And as it was, J-Monster came over with some units of his own and sort of obviously pushed into the middle with me there, and that really did... that caused a bit of a knee-jerk reaction. Obviously, Númenor had to send reinforcements over there, and then Númenor didn't have enough to really defend itself against the main Khad-dûm advance, and obviously it was pretty much consistent progress from me against Isengard as well. The composition of Isengard in particular, I would say, was probably not ideally suited for taking on the dwarves, but even so, it could have gotten messy for us. I mean, that cavalry in the back line was still a real pain to deal with, and it did do some damage to me. But with how split up my crossbows were, with the fact that the cavalry was having to avoid a lot of my spears and sort of go around them in order to try and get at the juicier crossbow targets, that left like, you know, 1 or 2 more volleys the crossbows could get, more damage, and there goes the Númenor general. Oh, and it was an axe guard that got him as well. There are the Highborns. So both of our generals survived this day, both Dane and Balin. We'll sit down for a well-deserved ale after this one. That is going to be the end. So you can see there the Temple Guard falling apart. Ooh, excuse me. So yeah, I mean, with the there was a bit of a discussion that happened after the battle. Sort of the armour of the dwarves was definitely key in this battle. I feel as though, you know, Númenor, they got less kills than Isengard, but also Isengard were the ones that had to deal with sort of the initial onslaught, as it were. Númenor, less AP tools. They did have the Temple Guard and the Ravenna Marines, but they did have less tools in terms of their armour piercing. Now, there is sort of debate about sort of how to deal with Númenor, because I feel as though you have to be real careful with Númenor. If you give them a way to sort of deal with armour too well, then they just become ridiculously good at everything. And, you know, they're already very, very strong. I mean, there are several factions which, you know, find it a nightmare to go up against Númenor, because obviously the Ravenna Marines can get a lot of damage against them very quickly. You know, their units are sort of very high in terms of the quality they bring to the table. You know, and Khad-dûm also have got a lot of quality here, but the armour was key. It's something which is definitely in flux. As far as Isengard go, I believe Isengard obviously have got a lot of AP options, and I'm actually surprised that we didn't see more of that. I mean, I'm surprised as well that they didn't actually use the terrain. I mean, like I said, the Uruk-hai crossbows were here. I'm surprised the ballista was not actually here from the start. I'm surprised that Isengard didn't try to make the fight on this choke point here, and then sort of siphon me into the crossbows and the ballista and the snaga, and then he could have pressured the back lines as well, and it would have been pretty grisly for me, because I wouldn't have had a choice other than to move forward. My army was set up to be aggressive. But as it was, the Isengard onion that I was presented with, it went well for me. It went great for me, actually, because obviously the initial layers made up of Dunlending Clansmen, Snaga and Half-Orc Baneguard, in terms of quality, are just no match at all for an Erebor advantage, especially not when there's a few units from Khad-dûm also mixed in there for support. So I'm surprised we didn't see more along the lines of the Uruk-hai Reavers as well. I mean, they're not overly expensive. They're not overly high in terms of quality, but they're definitely AP. And I feel as though they would have been more useful. I don't feel as though the Dunlending Clansmen may very well be very cheap, But in my opinion, they didn't really achieve much of anything. Like they just stood in the way of my Erebor legionaries for about 20 seconds and got mulched. So yeah, but having a look at what did the damage for me, indeed my Erebor legionaries were the centre of my efforts, because over 200 kills each, very, very effective. Obviously, again, initially they were fighting off against units which they were always going to be able to kill. And as soon as they came up against something a little bit tankier in the shape of the Uruk-hai Berserkers, they started to struggle a little bit more, because the Uruk-hai Berserkers are quite well positioned to deal with a unit like Erebor Legionaries. No Naz-kai as well was something which I was quite grateful to see, because obviously the Naz-kai are a very, very potent infantry unit. They could probably beat the Highborns of Erebor with their AP. Highborns of Erebor getting 100 kills as well, which is pretty good considering they were up against stuff like Alcarondas Legion in the middle there. Axguard of Erebor doing decently enough as well. Obviously, mostly the Axguard of Erebor were part of large pushes, so they weren't really on their own for any length of time. This unit of Ironfoot Pikes over here was probably the one that was committed initially, like sort of very early. Both of them were, but the one that was up against the sort of the lower tier Isengard units getting a lot of kills. And the crossbows, very mixed, I think, from the Ironfoot crossbows, we can say. I mean, obviously the crossbows, initially they were firing into sort of softer infantry targets, but as the battle went on, they were definitely more sort of trying to do damage to that cavalry, which they succeeded into a point. And definitely they were a lightning rod for the cavalry's attention. But the ultimate lightning rod were the Blacklocks. They may have only got 33 kills, but you have to go after the Blacklocks with a lot to try and shut them down. And I feel as though with all of the attention that the Blacklocks took, you know, the rest of my army was free to go about its business with a little bit more freedom. So it's not often that the Blacklock engineers sort of perform a viable role in the army by being the bait. But I feel as though that was the case here, because while they took a lot of that cavalry attention away from our front line, you saw as well in the middle, when that cavalry got a very nice charge into that central position where we were dominating, it did a lot of damage. If they did that maybe sooner on the infantry forces rather than just trying to go after the skirmishers, maybe things could have been different. It would have been risky, of course, because that would have left my crossbows and Blacklocks to start shooting the cavalry with a little bit more freedom, but even so, I mean, it's a debate that can be had, I think. So yeah, obviously relatively even in terms of the kill counts. Obviously Númenor with by far and away the smallest army on the field, the rest of us having relatively similar numbers actually. These Dwarven armies obviously more aggressive, so a little bit larger, you know, obviously more basic units like Ironfoots and Warriors of Khad-dûm on the field, you know, less about the super elites, particularly from Khad-dûm. Even though they brought 2 of them, they still brought a lot of the more basic units as well. No First Legion, for example, instead going for the sentries. But yeah, the dwarves, you know, most people think of the dwarves as a defensive force, and you know, when they dig in, that is still going to be something they are very much good at. But when the situation is right, they can be a very, very potent aggressive force if you build that way. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this. I did enjoy playing in this one very much on a map that I haven't played on before. And obviously this is 0.97, so it's always good to see the next build in action. Hopefully we'll see a few more of these battles in the coming days and weeks. Yeah, hope you enjoyed this, and hope you'll join me for whatever is next.